Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Tales from the Inside, brought to you by the Comedy Studio. Now, would you please welcome your host, Angela Sawyer. Thank you, Angela.
Hi, thanks everybody. It's very nice to talk to you. Thanks for coming to Tales from the Inside. I'm super glad to have you. It's lovely to see you during this time when I only get to see 1-inch high electronic versions of people. So if you haven't been to this particular show before, we've been running it every week during quarantine, and it used to be a show that happened once a month inside my house. And it is a storytelling show basically where I try to encourage people to really just be who they already actually are and talk to me the way they would at a party. And basically it's I wish that I had more friends, and this is my way of getting people to treat me like their friend. I just arrange it so they have to. So it's a fun time. I will start first, and so I gave everybody a little theme, and then I immediately undercut myself and told them that they didn't have to use it. And basically most of the people who come to the show are regular performers, and when you are a performer, you spend lots of time like saying the same thing over and over again and knowing when to make just the right gesture, and it's almost like you're acting in a play that is yourself already, and that is weird. So this is a show to not do that. And it's a nice time. It makes me feel like I get to know people, and it's cool. So I'll start off. I'm going to tell you the story tonight of my first job, which is simple, but the job was not that simple. So I think it's a fun time. My first job was when I was 12. I grew up outside of Denver, Colorado, and my mom was a failed artist preschool teacher, which is why I have that exact vibe. That is the vibe that I have. I know. And it's like a little bit of therapist, and that's the whole recipe of me. And that's where I get it all from. So she worked at a place when I was growing up called, no lie, no exaggeration, called Happy Valley Children's Ranch. Sounds like it was made in a Stephen King novel or an acid trip, one or the other, maybe both at once. Not a place that people work, you would think, but my mom worked there, and so that was where I had my first job. I got hired. Happy Valley Children's Ranch was a preschool that decided, because it was the late 70s, they decided that the best thing for small children was to put them inside a fenced area with live animals and then let them go. And that was everybody's idea of childcare at that time. If you know anybody from the 70s, they were all raised outdoors exclusively with no supervision. That's just how it was done at that time. That was good advice. And so this was a place where people were taking extra good care of their children. They were being extra precious with their children. So they just put them in a fenced area with live animals. And the preschool was built in the middle of like a nothing land. Like there's the city and there's the suburbs, and then there's farms, and right between the suburbs and the farms, especially in the West, that is not New England, there's nothing land where there's just nobody's doing anything there. Nobody's put any buildings up. The weeds just kind of grow wherever they want to grow, and occasionally somebody will plunk something down in there, and that's where this preschool was. So out back there was just a large ditch, not usually a thing you want to have near children, but at this place, no problem. And one of the major activities, especially when you were trying to get little kids to like spend their energy so that they could calm down afterwards, one of the big activities was next door to the preschool, there was a place, there was just a mountain of old tires. And so little kids were encouraged to drag tires in front of the ditch and then roll them into the ditch. That was the big intellectual activity that went on at that place. uh, so the preschool owned a bunch of turkeys and a mule and some pigs and several miniature ponies. People who are horse girls know exactly what I mean when I say miniature ponies. Everybody else just thinks a tiny pony, but that's not quite what they are. A miniature pony, it's like a Clydesdale crossed with a corgi. It's like a stocky, shrunk, but still many hundreds of pounds horse. It's just real short. And my job, the miniature ponies had obviously been at that place for a very, very long time, and they were extremely well trained, not through like somebody was really great at training horses, just through sheer brute repetition and having a bunch of 2 or 3 year old children beat on them all the time. They were like blinded to the world around them. These horses every day at exactly the same time, 7 days a week, they would hang out in a field that was their field, and then at exactly 11 o'clock, with no prompting, they would just walk into a single file line, and they would walk out the gate of their field. And then there was a little like old fashioned hitch that was in a circle, like a little chintzy merry-go-round type thing. And they would walk in a circle around the merry-go-round, and they would do that for exactly 15 minutes, like they were hypnotized. And then they would magically walk back to their field very slowly. And then they would do whatever it is horses do all day for the rest of the day. And they had done this so many times at the exact same time every single day that nobody ever even bothered to like hook anything up for them anymore. You just waited for them to come and stuck a toddler on their back, and they were very wide, so the toddler wasn't going to fall down, and it would beat on them and scream, and they ignored that completely, and it was fine. It was perfectly fine. So when I was 12, I got hired to feed these animals. That was my job. I had been to the preschool a bunch of times because my mom worked there. And my favorite thing about the preschool when I was 12 was that they had a vending machine that I thought was cooler than other vending machines. I know that doesn't sound like a big interest, but I wasn't old enough to have deep ones. So they had a vending machine there that had Crystal Pepsi, which was super hip, very cool. And also, it was only 25 cents. And other vending machines had bigger, fancier lights, and they were all 50 cents. And I was like, this fucked up vending machine is the one for me. This is the one. So I would just go there and press the buttons on the vending machine all day, hang out, not really pay that much attention, maybe roll a tire into a ditch. That was all that was going on. I got hired to feed the animals, so some nice old ladies who worked there told me, like, here's how you feed a turkey. You just grab this stuff in this bucket, you throw it at the turkey. It's that simple. And here's how you feed a pig. You grab this stuff in this other bucket, you throw it at the pig. And you don't even have to feed the horses because they have hay to eat already. You don't have to do anything. You just have to make sure that by 11, the gate is open. If the gate is not open, they don't know what to do. You just have to make sure it's open. You can leave it open most of the time, but you have to make sure it is open by 11.
Oh, no.
So I would walk to the school because it wasn't very far from our house. And I would go in the morning and the evening and feed the animals. And it was very simple. The turkeys were pretty smart and they seemed to know what food was. And the pigs were pretty smart and they definitely knew what food was, and they could tell which person was coming to feed them. And they did not hate me. I was, smaller than the owners, but taller than the children. So I stuck out and did fine. And one day I went and I was running late and I didn't realize. And when I got to the gate with the miniature horses, they were at the gate. And miniature horses, like they express roughly the same level of emotion as like an old library, like it's only very slowly, and it's one at a time, and it's not exactly happy. So they were there at the gate, and I couldn't tell if they were angry or not, but they didn't seem psyched. And I didn't know quite how late I was because I was a 12-year-old living in Denver. I didn't have like a watch. So I just knew I was late and I should have had the gate open already. And I was like, oh shit. So I opened the gate and they were a little like, a couple of them, but, and then they came out just like they always do. And they went around in a circle. And I was like, okay, pretty good. And I'm holding, and at the morning that this happened, the last morning of my employment there, I was employed there for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, which in 11-year-old time, 11, 12-year-old time, it's very long. I was a big veteran at this point. I was holding my turkey feet and my pig feet, and it was spring, so it was super muddy, and I had failed to put on proper footwear. I was wearing flip-flops, which at that time were called thongs, and I'm sorry, that's rude of me to even say it, but it's just an old person thing that is true. Uh, so I was wearing flip-flops and carrying the stuff, and it was muddy, and my feet were really slipping around, and I got too close to the horses, and as they were walking around, one of them stepped on my foot.
Mm.
Now, the miniature horses, part of their pattern that they were used to is they would walk out, they would walk around the merry-go-round, and they'd pause, and then they'd walk around a few more times, and they'd pause, which I think originally was so you could take children on and off of them.
Mm.
But it had been such a long-standing tradition that nobody did that part anymore. They just paused sometimes. And it was kind of up to them. They did whatever they wanted, and it worked out okay, so it didn't matter. But of course, right as these horses walked across, that was when they happened to stop, when one of them, his back leg was right on the top of my foot, and I had no shoes on. And I could feel my feet sinking in the mud. So at first I was just standing, and then slowly I was standing a little bit wronger and a little bit wronger. And then there wasn't any more room to stand any wronger, and it started to really hurt. Miniature horses weigh like 800 to 1,200 pounds.
Oh
So
my
it
God.
started to really, really hurt. And I was like, I got to get these horses to move. I got to get them to move. So I drop the food and I start screaming at the horses, like really at first I'm trying to be nice, but quickly that goes away. I'm really just like beating on them, trying to get to them to move. And they are used to 2 and 3-year-old kids yelling. So they don't turn around or look or anything, but I'm really pushing it. And unfortunately, that meant that they decided to just stop and wait to see what was happening. So I'm standing there crooked with my foot underneath the horse's foot, and it hurts. And they just decide to hang. And so we stand there for like a solid couple of hours. I can't get them to move. They're too heavy to move. I try like taking the food and throwing it away to see if they'll go after it. That's nothing. I try hitting them with the bucket, nothing. We just stand there for a really, really long time. And then finally I hear, and I have no way of getting out of the situation. There's no such thing as a cell phone. There's no one, like I'm just supposed to walk off to this place. And I'm a kid in the 70s. So kids just go out and then they're gone till they find their way home. So I don't think, like, it might be a couple of days before someone comes back to the preschool to find me. And I just have to wait it out. There's nothing else for me to do. I push and scream and freak out and nothing happens. Finally, I calm down, and then it's just like, okay, I guess I just wait here. I can't get out, so I just wait. So I just sit in the mud. There's nothing else for me to do. And a good couple of hours goes by, and then I hear a car. And I get up out of the mud, and I start again to like beat on the horses. No response. Finally, my mom, thank God, comes walking on the other side of the school, and she's pissed because I went off to go do my, child job and I haven't come back from it. So something's gone wrong. I did a bad job, obviously. And she sees the horses and she's just like, oh my God, what the fuck? She doesn't know that my foot's hurt or anything. So she's just like, what is wrong with you? How did you even make them stop? Like, how did you even make the giant ponies stop what they were doing? They do it every day by themselves. How did you screw this up? And she yells, and she finally finds the one that is always in front and pulls on the reins. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they slowly file back into their field where they belong, and everything's fine again, except that I don't have a right foot anymore. And my mom is a 70s mom. So when I can't walk and I'm like, oh, my foot is hurt. She's like, what is wrong with you? What is your problem? And I'm like not walking right back to the car, and she's like, cut it out. Just, get it together. You've already screwed up. You can't get out of it. Just, you're covered in mud. You screwed up the ponies. The one thing, did you even feed the turkeys? And finally, when we get back to the house, she realized that I did actually get hurt. And I get to wear a cast for the rest of the summer, a big ass honking cast. And it saved me. Later that summer and that fall, I knew that I was going to go to junior high school. And I knew that junior high school would be very hard because at 11, 12 years old, I was already a giant weirdo. You can see my glasses in my bedroom. You know that that's a true thing. And I knew that junior high school would be tough. But now I had a story, I had a big cast. I forged the signatures of imaginary people on it, so it would look like I was very popular.
Oh.
I had a tale to tell, and I could not do any outside physical activity. So I was like, I'm ready for junior high. I'm perfectly ready. And that is the story of how my first job turned out great.
Yeah.
So that's one story. There's lots more. I'm super psyched for the performers that you guys have in front of you tonight. One of the things I really like about the show is that I only have people who I actually really like on it, which is really fun. And I know that that's something that should happen all the time, and yet it does not. So I'm very excited. Your first performer is stellar. She can often be seen on a show called Pick a Side Stupid, which happens in Boston on Fridays, and it's a comedic debate show, which I don't know what that sounds like. Basically, it's comics fake arguing at each other. It's really fun. She is really, really good at it, and I can't wait for you to hear her. Please put your hands together right now for Laura Clark.
Hello. Thank you, Angela. Sorry. So let's see. Thank you for having me. I was asked to share a story about a time when I stabbed danger in the face, which is cool. But like I was like, when is it time? And I'm like, oh, is it an entire youth of just treating my body like shit because youth was never going to end? So like I don't have like a story. I'm just I was just like writing shit out all day trying to like sort of parse out a theme. Um which again is that when you're young you're going to live forever, which makes sense. Like I've been feeling empathy for these dumbass college kids who are having these big naked face parties where they're like packed into a pool, like just face to face, just right there in their faces. But like, I've had a great time hunkering down this year and just waiting a year or however long to get back to normal because I'm 35. A year is a 35th of my life. These fucking children, a year is 1/18th of their entire life. They just escaped adult supervision. They just escaped the rules. And now it's like, oh no, there's even more rules and you can do fewer things, except you also can drink. I don't know. I get it. Cause again, like they're gonna live forever. So like give yourself alcohol poisoning and vomit coronavirus onto the co-eds around you because like you never got to do that before. Like that's the thing is so like to like there's all that like, oh, like you think you're gonna live forever, like how could you not? Like, oh, there's gonna be a consequence a month from now, like that's a million years when you're young. That's never gonna happen. So I don't know. All you can do is stab danger in, right? All because it's not real to you. I mean, unless your life is very traumatizing. I don't know. And even then you probably know you're gonna die. I don't know. That's kind of sad. But like, kids are gonna live for like. Okay, one thing I've thought about a lot uh, is how thankful I am that no one ever offered me heroin or meth in like literally before ever. No one has ever offered me heroin or meth. I've never been cool enough. But if someone had offered before I was like 25, I would have been like, yeah, let's see what that's like. Like, because why not? Like, oh, my brain's a lab. My brain chemistry is just for throwing stuff at. I still act like that a little bit, but I also like, I can see the arc towards when I'll have to stop. It's a bummer, but like, I'm ready. You know, like, I think about being a kid and being a kid in the early 2000s. You know, no one was offering me heroin. So really, and you know, weed was like, it was like exciting if someone had weed and I could buy it. That was like, I don't know if you know the Music Man, but that was like when the Wells Fargo wagon comes and like, oh, holy shit, like, so it's in town and it could be for anyone and who knows? And like, oh man, I miss it now. Like if I smoke bad weed now, I still feel nostalgic. Oh, and smoking it through tinfoil is dangerous too. Like that, but because they've connected it with Alzheimer's. But again, like imagine being a high schooler thinking you will ever have to care about you having Alzheimer's. Again, that is eons away. So who gives a shit? You could buy like ephedrine. I just feel like I just like abuse the shit out of my body and not even in like a interesting way. Like I said, like I was never given the opportunity to try heroin, or OxyContin or like anything. And I would have just jumped at the chance to do it because it was something different. Because it's so boring to be young. So I just like don't feel bad or no, like I don't envy any young person, especially today, but just like in general, you're not allowed to do anything. All you can do is stab danger in the face. Because it's like people keep telling you that all this shit is bad for you, but like you don't see any evidence of that because your body springs back from everything and like everything is different. And like there's all these experiences you haven't had before, and it's like, what do you mean bad for me? That doesn't compute. I mean, again, I'm talking as someone who's been like very healthy my whole life. But regardless, it doesn't get better with age, certainly. And like, yeah, I don't know. I just think of that like defiance in the face of just like dangerous that like doesn't apply to me and never will. You know, you could take like 5 Tylenol PM or whatever, and it's just like these are the things I think about now when it's like 8:15 p.m. and I'm taking my calcium pill and my B complex supplement, or I'm like, you know, doing my special exercises to protect my spine, or I'm like glaring at a motorcycle, whatever it is. Now I'm like taking so much care of myself. I'm like, oh no, I'm precious cargo. And that's just, it's too bad when you're young, you just don't have any sense of what precious cargo you really are. And I don't like, I think it's good anyway. I like where I'm at right now with my aging body because now I can eat a fried food and it'll give me an ulcer immediately. So then it's easy to stay away from fried food. When you're 16 and so it's like, oh no, like fried food's very bad for your arteries. What? Shut up! Who gives a shit? My arteries they're pink and beautiful. What are you talking about? And so now I'm like those are consequences way in the future. So now that the consequence is a lot closer, or like I do my little exercises so my spine doesn't hurt, as opposed to like, well, if you commit to this every day, then you'll see results of looking hot in 4 to 6 weeks. And I'd be like, 4 to 6 weeks, that's a lifetime. But now it's like, hey, like roll your spine out and do your little push-ups against a wall, and you won't injure yourself from sleeping wrong. So I don't, it's nice. It's nice to have a reason to take a little bit better care of myself. And I hope all the youth that survive their dumb but understandable COVID choices will hopefully grow to see the same thing and be like, oh, I should take a little bit better care of myself and those around me. So those are my thoughts on defiantly stabbing danger in the face. Thank you for having me.
Give it up for Laura Clark. So great. A perfect argument for why you should probably, that's the only argument I can think of that would convince me to take better care of myself. I'm 50 years old, which means that I would like to dump this cargo right off as soon as humanly possible. So I waffle between being like, you can't do that, or oh, who cares if you do that? It's a very, I'm very inconsistent at this point.
Get this shit over with.
Yeah. I hope you guys all get. The thing I hate about the it gets better, it gets worse is that it gets even worse than worse. And it's really hard to explain that there's like so many more levels of worse possible for everyone. So I hope that you guys all get to be as old as me so that you can hate it too. Enjoy. Thank you so much, Laura. That was fantastic. All right, so our next performer, I'm super psyched to have. I used to see him around Boston all the time, and he moved to New York City, and I miss him. And he's fantastic. He's just a stone favorite of mine, and I can't wait to see what story he's going to tell you. So please put your hands together right now for Rod Ferguson.
Hey, thank you, Angela. I'm so excited to be here. And it's, okay. Okay, so my prompt was a time that I really needed to change clothing. And I have to, give the caveat that I was only told that I should be myself at the last minute. So that's not enough preparation for me. I don't know how to be a real person. So I'm just gonna go with what I got. So there are a lot of ways that I've disappointed my father, and but my favorite one is that I wasn't much of a sailor, and so my dad, when we were kids, would take us out sailing, and my sister's job was to help with the ropes, and my job was to yell, "We're dead!" Whenever the boat tipped too far. It was, I gave myself the job, but they did send me to sailing lessons, and where you each get like your own sailboat the size of a bathtub, so that like on your own you can learn how to capsize that bathtub, and my favorite part of this was taking the capsized boat, bringing it back the right side, and then bailing out the water with like, because I thought it was amazing, they gave us like Clorox bottles with the bottom sawed off, so that was a great way to get the water out. And this was my favorite part of sailing. So I am a professional passenger, and last summer my father found this thing where you can pay to be a passenger / crew in training for on a race on a sailboat that's like 90 feet with 3 masts, racing from Massachusetts to Bermuda. So there's absolutely an element of potential death in this. And so, because you could fly, but why do that when you could get there much slower with a lot more danger, right? And pay for the privilege. So so my so my dad decides to pay for this to fulfill his fantasy of my being a sailor that gets lost at sea. And and that seems like an exaggeration, but it's definitely possible, which we learned the morning before the race when we did the man overboard drill. So we're still in the harbor, like we're on a mooring, and it's raining and it's calm, and they've got all of the crew in training, 15 of us, who are just sort of like huddled together, and they have us number off so we can like figure out who actually is the person in the water, uh, and they throw a white buoy into the water to represent the man overboard, and they say you need to spot the buoy, the person, the person that's overboard. If you fall overboard and you're not unconscious, you're the first line of defense. So you need to yell "man overboard." If you're on the boat and you hear "man overboard" or you see someone fall over, you lock eyes, on the head in the water, and you point, and you do not take your eyes away, because then like you might totally lose track of the person and then they're totally dead. So do not look away. And meanwhile, I've got like a rain hood on, so my peripheral vision is like zero, but I am not going to lose track of this white buoy. And so we're supposed to do that, and then they have and then we're supposed to like get someone else. Then we're supposed to say "man overboard" ourselves, and like you can use volume according to how much you like the person who's overboard. So it might just sort of be "man overboard," but and then you tell someone else, you get someone else to like throw over a life preserver, and then the professional crew will get in the inflatable boat, lower it down, go to the find the life preserver with the person in it, fingers crossed, and then save the person, bring them back to the boat. So I am totally doing my job. I am looking at the buoy, and I am not going to look away. And I see the buoy, and I see the professional crew. They come and they get the buoy into the small boat. They get the small boat into the main boat. I can look wherever I need to now, and I'm thrilled that we did this drill well. And the first mate is less pleased because none of us threw over a life preserver. Because we were all so afraid of losing track of this fake person overboard. So you could totally get lost at sea, especially on this boat, because we're not throwing any life preservers if you fall over. So I'm getting ahead of myself, though. So the only reason I did this is because my sister, Emily, was coming too. And, that means that if I do end up being buried at sea, at least someone who loves me will be there. And so there's these emails that are going around beforehand. And there's this guy, Tony, who has already established himself as someone to avoid when we do meet, because he's asked so many questions. And one question is, will there be hot bunking? And I was not familiar with the term. But in the packing list, it said Vaseline, and there was no explanation for the Vaseline. And so I'm a little bit worried now that I'm hearing that hot bunking is a thing I should look up. Now, if you also did not learn about hot bunking in your sailing lessons, I will let you know that it is when there are more people than there are bunks. And that means that you basically have to timeshare a bunk with someone else. And thankfully, there was no hot bunking necessary, because I would have preferred to be the man overboard, especially once I met these people. But so the night before we leave, the Beverly Yacht Club decides to hold a reception for all of us, but not actually all of us. Actually, everyone except us, because our captain was an alcoholic booze bag who forgot to register with the yacht club that our crew of 20 people were part of this race. So the yacht club freaks out, and they're like, "We don't have food for you. You have to go eat elsewhere." And I feel like that is the perfect way for my sailing trip to start is to be told I'm not welcome at a yacht club, right? I mean, that's sort of what they do. So, so then the other news that makes me think this might not be smooth sailing across the Atlantic is that the engineer says, "Yeah, sorry, but the showers aren't working." And I was just sort of like, "You're the engineer. That's like your entire job, right? Like, is to make sure shit's working on this boat before I'm on it for 4 days with 20 strangers." Okay. So it's okay. It's okay. I'm just hoping that some of the other he was busy fixing all the other shit on this boat that I'm now trusting my life to. I should point out that I am probably the only gay in this party, and I have to say I'm a little intimidated. You know, it doesn't seem now that it is a popularity contest, and like if people are not into someone who's gay, they might sort of be like man overboard. So I keep it. I kind of keep it in the wraps a little, but I'm carrying my dresses because I'm going from Boston Pride to New York Pride, via the sailing trip to Bermuda. But anyway, so the food is the one highlight. They had an onboard cook who was also an alcoholic, but a more jolly one, and I mean it's like the perfect job for alcoholics because we have watches, so my group is on the noon to 4 watch and then the midnight to 4 a.m. watch, and when people are sleeping in watches, you can drink any friggin' time, and that is why everyone on all the professional crew got jobs on this thing. So I was surprised but the food was actually quite good because my expectations were pretty low because I was going into this, I just assumed it would be cannibalism because I mean, really, every story about cannibalism happened at sea, right? I mean, I feel like that was how they just did things back in the day. So real sailors eat people, and that's just a fact. But you really need to watch watch yourself because you need to maintain your appetite to eat people. And the first day, they served chili, and that was the start of the race, and we were all really excited, and everybody's awake, and we're eating this chili, and it's kind of rough, and we're tacking here, and we're only competing with one other boat, just so you know. There's probably 100 boats, but there's only one other boat as big as ours, and so we're and they're basically, their crew is children, so we feel pretty confident that we can beat these kids, and we actually get out of that harbor pretty quickly, but it's rough, and around 7:30 that night I napped a little bit and I got up, and I was so seasick. I got up and I was carefully putting on one sleeve at a time, and I get to the front to the stern, and I'm like, can someone help me, get a harness on me so I'm not man overboard? And they lead me to the spot, and I held it in until then, and I just vomited, and it was a beautiful sunset. And I was just oh, and then I was oh, and I was oh, and there's people on either side of me also vomiting, so it was just wonderful. That's so during the midnight watch, there's 2 people also in fetal positions, and I have to I'm there to steer the wheel, and the first mate is here's the compass, make sure we're on this bearing, and I'm looking at it for 20 seconds, and now I'm nauseous, and so I'm just Jesus, take the wheel, and I go to my spot to vomit, and I'm very upset because someone else's vomit is in my spot. I paid good money, that was my spot, and I was tiny, so so yes. Oh God, I can't believe I'm talking about this. So my time's got to be running out. But I'll tell one little thing, of one snippet of a story that I heard from the first mate on one of our midnight watches. because we started running out of things to talk about. So he tells us about the time that he helped impregnate a dolphin, and I was sort of like, you know how that sounds, and and he was like, oh, but yeah, well, I I just helped. There were a lot of scientists around, and I was like, that's totally my sex life too. But he said, no, I just helped to restrain the dolphin and while they impregnated her. And I was like, this is sort of like a really awful Me Too story. And uh and so and he said, but I was really surprised because like I had to talk to the dolphin, like to calm her down. And I was like, have you like never heard of foreplay? Like do you speak to the women you have sex with? Like what is I'm worried about the first mate. But anyway, I should be more worried about me. So we arrive in Bermuda by a miracle of God. I haven't showered for 6 days. So I do really feel like I qualify for needing a change of clothes. and did I mention? I mentioned that this was a race and that we're competing with one, boat of children. But did I mention that we found out we were disqualified?
No.
So we arrive in Bermuda and we get like into cell phone reception in time to see an article about our disqualification because we did not cross the starting line appropriately. So this like other large boat of child labor who like passed the finish line hours after we did. They won, and they beat us. So, just to recap, the Beverly Yacht Club won't have me. This is the longest I've ever not showered, and in my first race ever as a sailor, I've been disqualified. So, I probably should have bailed earlier, but I think my takeaway is I may not be much of a sailor, but I have been at sea.
Oh my God, give it up for Rod Ferguson.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I loved every instant of that story. So I want to tell you, when you were talking about the guy who helped impregnate a dolphin, I've been thinking a lot lately. There's in the early 1970s, there's a famous marine biology lab that was funded by NASA, basically because one of the more famous hippies that was around at that time was Carl Sagan, and he was like, wouldn't it be cool if we learned how to talk to dolphins? NASA, why don't you give us a ton of money for that? And they were like, yes, let's do it. They gave them a ton of money, and some people tried to learn how to talk to dolphins. And then a couple of years later, one of the women scientists who worked at the marine biology lab, she got accused of having sex with one of the dolphins. And that's a terrible accusation. I can't imagine getting an accusation like that thrown at you. And her response to that accusation was, oh, no, I was just jacking him off, which is not really the response people were looking for.
You played to
and I always thought, like, wow, what a horrible human being. What's wrong with that lady? Until very recently, I got a new cat, and I've never had a cat before, and I discovered what it means when you have a cat in heat. And it is very not what I was guessing. Basically, the cat started to go nuts, and now for the last week or so, any interaction that I have with the cat, I'm basically jacking off the cat. If I look at the cat, if I feed the cat, if I am in the same room as the cat, there's just like an atmosphere of cat sex everywhere. and I cannot get away from it. I feel like that lady. I live in an apartment with roommates, and they're very nice people, and we've all been home a lot because of quarantine. And so we have an apartment that is generally pretty quiet until out of the silence, my roommates hear me saying very loudly to the cat, would you get your vagina juice off of that, please? And it does not, that's not a cool vibe to have, like in the hallway with people at 7 a.m. So I just want to say I haven't been to see, but I can imagine how bad it could go. And that was a fantastic story. I appreciate it a lot. So our next performer, I'm super psyched to have you. We're about halfway through. We've got a few more, and we've got some amazing performers on the way. Our next performer runs a really cool storytelling show that you can see on WGBH called Stories from the Stage. She is a great teller. I really love what she does. And I think you guys are going to fall in love instantly. So please put your hands together right now for Teresa Okoken.
Hi everyone. So as Angela said, I am a storyteller. I'm also a writer, and as a storyteller, though, I feel like deep guilt and shame when I'm like not prepared for a show, and my life is just not allowing me to be prepared for anything right now. So I've been like sort of furiously messaging with Angela for like the last week, and I'm like, I don't know, can I just read something? And she's like, of course, do whatever. So yeah, I like to imagine that if this was, like just a party at Angela's house, and we were all just supposed to be ourselves, that like probably the best I could do at a party was in terms of human interaction right now in my life is just like read off of a page and tell you my feelings by reading them. So I have two pieces. The theme that I was given was to talk about a time when I felt lost and then I got found. And I don't know that I've achieved part 2 of that, but I've got part 1 at least. So we'll go with that. So this first piece is called For When I'm in Love. I get multiple emails a day from Redfin with homes that I can't afford the half of. For when I'm in love, I tell myself. I'll scroll through Instagram, my thumbs stumbling across non-traditional, untraditional non-diamond engagement rings and lingerie, bed linen. For when I'm in love, I say to no one, with my thumbs filling the once empty heart bright red as I double tap it. Lake houses, cabins, glamping in the Finger Lakes. I curate these lists of homes on Airbnb, places that I want to stay with my beloved for when I'm in love. So there's this man. I cannot call him my beloved because he never loved me, and I never really loved him either, but my body wanted him. My body was drawn to him. It was like there were these little shards of shaved magnet sprinkled all over my gut that just laid there all of the time, like a big pile of sparkly stuff until he was around. And then all of a sudden they would stand up on end, alert, waiting to be seen and waiting to attach. This man, he loves road trips. It's one of the many tiny facts about him that I've gathered in my memory, hoping that it might eventually matter to him that I've been paying attention. And sometimes when I'm out for a long drive, I would take little videos from my cell phone's dashboard perch for him. These 10-second snippets of a roadway lined with trees, my car gliding over a bridge with the water glistening on both sides. There was sparkly stuff there below the surface, dancing in the attention and light of the sun. I would text him these videos wordlessly. Thank you for taking me on this road trip, he'd respond. And when I arrived at my destination, if I had one, I would rest in a cozy bed, my head alone on 2 pillows. I would watch the video again. I would read his text message over and over again. But he never went on any road trips with me, and he never bought me any rings, and we never shared a home. He was really never anything to me, or at least I was never anything to him, certainly not in the way that I wanted us to be. Once I mentioned my For When I'm in Love list to my friends, and then it occurred to me that it was really silly and really pipe dreamed and super unreasonably hopeful and unreasonably hoardful as well, because I can buy myself my own rings and I can make myself my own home and I can go to Canada all by myself. So another thing that I was doing that year was hoarding paid time off at my job. And my job is horrible, and it's not horrible, but they have one of those very capitalistic, abusive, use it or lose it rules about paid time off. So the end of the fiscal year was coming and I had all this time to use. And so I booked a room. I opened up my Airbnb Quebec Eastern Township list. And I found a bevy of double beds just waiting for my single head. And I booked a little place near the water. It called itself a chalet. I think that's how you say it in French. But it was really just a very, very dingy beach house. So I grabbed my passport and I bought groceries at the last Trader Joe's before crossing the border, and I headed on into Canada. I got to the border crossing and the lady there was like, "You drove all the way from Boston just to stay in Magog for the weekend?" And she's like sort of looking over my passport, and I was like, "Oh, I've just always wanted to go to Canada." And I did a very good job of appropriately peopling and not telling her the entire backstory of why I was going to Canada. "Are you going to meet someone, maybe a date?" she asked me. And I was like, "No, my life is not that exciting." So I cross the border and I drive to the Airbnb and I drop my bags and I head down to the water. But I'm really like not an outdoorsy person. I'm very indoorsy. And I never really know what to do when I'm alone by myself in like a beautiful scenic place. So I sat on the steps and I took some selfies, and then I walked along the water for a bit and I collected some stones so that I could stack them. And then I made one of my beach selfies into my new Facebook profile picture, and I captioned it with a haiku. And the haiku said, "I tried to balance some rocks along the shoreline, but they all fell down." And someone commented, "You are your own rock." And as supportive as I knew that that was supposed to be, I suddenly felt like everybody knew. Because one time my little brother was like, "You take all of those selfies and it makes it look like you're always alone." Anyhow, I spent that weekend with myself, which is a thing that I have learned to do, to be with myself and not by myself. I went out for drinks and I visited a local thrift store, and I ate my first real Canadian poutine. And then the next day I ate more Canadian poutine, and I visited a monk abbey and took home samples of their wine and cheese. And I had no intention of sharing any of it with anyone. I went for a bunch of long scenic drives and I made several little recordings of the trees whirring past me on winding roads. And every night I went back to my Airbnb and I rewatched the videos with myself. All right, continuing in this my theme of cuffing season, thoughts on cuffing season. This next piece is called Sushi Date. He messaged me on LinkedIn. He didn't have a picture and I didn't recognize his name, but from the look of his profile, I heard a bell in my head ring, and I said, "Ooh-wee, that guy? Oh, I remember him." So I took a screenshot of his entirely innocuous and ambiguous and completely friendly first message, and I sent it to my friends with a little group chat prayer of, "Please let this guy be hitting on me." We chatted for a bit, and then he sent me his phone number, which gave me pause. I stared at my phone screen, growing blue-green in my hand for a moment, and I was like, what is this? This isn't what LinkedIn is about. This isn't how LinkedIn is supposed to work. So I asked him if his intentions were professional, like he wants me to let him know if I am aware of any job openings or social, like he wants to get a drink sometime. And he wrote back, I'm not looking for a job. So we already had, we were already on our sushi date when I learned that this was a man who believed in cooked sushi. It should have been a no from that. I mean, I should have just walked away. But we were already there, and the place had this huge menu, and then he upped the ante of not only being a person who believes in cooked sushi, but he also, at a sushi place, ordered a bibimbap bowl or whatever you call those, which is like, fine, it's delicious, but there were so many options of sushi to choose from, and we were supposed to be out for sushi. And when given the option to eat the most delicious thing on the menu, the most delicious thing in the room, what kind of person chooses anything else? He also ordered the same drink that I was having without even tasting mine first, and we didn't share our food, which is a thing that normally I like to do. I ate everything that was on my plate, and then he let me take home his leftovers, which I appreciated. The drinks that we got were great. They had ginger in them, and were really, really delicious, but the sushi was just kind of fine. I really like my rice to be very sticky, and I like it to be heavy and wet in my mouth. And their rice was just kind of fine. And the conversation, the date in general, was a lot like the rice. Like, it was just kind of fine. So then this guy drove me home. Now, the summer before my LinkedIn sushi date, I ate out a woman for the first time. She was there. Her body was there. Her husband was there, and his body was there too. She and I were both bleeding. We were raw and new and eager to taste each other. And I didn't know what a pussy was supposed to taste like. I couldn't tell if the way that it tasted was sort of surprising and undertoned like that ginger drink was, or if this is just how they were normally, but it really didn't matter because I was eating the most delicious thing in the room, and I wasn't interested in anything else that was there, including her husband's penis or having it inside of me. He respected that, but I have to imagine that if I had a penis, I would want to put it in vaginas as well, and I might easily forget how boring my penis is in a room where there are so many vaginas, when there's such a huge menu and everything is delicious and hungry to be eaten with soft tongues. I wonder what her husband tasted in me, and I wonder what he thought as he watched us getting full on each other and as he watched us sharing him. I wonder if he knew that none of that had anything to do with him. There was a moment on my LinkedIn sushi date when he was driving me home when our conversation paused. Or maybe he kept talking, but there was a pause in the extent to which I was paying attention to what he was saying because my thoughts had drifted. And I began to wonder what it might be like for this guy if he ever found out that this moment was it for me. This ride home with him, this date with him, where he was smelling perfect and I was feeling nothing. That this moment was the one in which I decided that I am not sure that I can date men anymore. I wondered if he would feel like he had something to do with that, if he would like take ownership for it. And I wondered if he would know that none of this had anything to do with him. When I drove home from my first threesome, I took a mental scan of my body and I worried that there was something wrong with me. Like, how can I do this? How can I feel all of that, all full and wet and bliss, and then get in my car and drive home and not even want any leftovers, not have any strings pulling at my heart? And the next morning, my friends asked me if this means that I'm bi now. And I responded by laughing. And I was like, I'm the same person that I was yesterday, who doesn't want to have sex with women. Like, what kind of person doesn't want to have sex with women? That's crazy. I just always want to eat the most delicious thing on the menu. Thank you.
Teresa Kochen, thank you so much. That was so good. Love it. It is very important to know which thing you want on the menu.
I think I still just want all the things on the menu, you know?
That's fair. I think here's a thing. Because I'm older now, I'm not ancient, but I'm middle-aged. And when I was in my 20s, I was very interested. I had a terrible time in junior high and high school, and I was like, okay, now I'm in charge of how things go, and nobody gets near me unless they pass all the tests, unless they check off every box. And that list is complicated, and there's a lot on there, and they can't miss anything. And it has to go just the way it has to go. And if they have not as an enthusiastic reaction as they should to Phil Spector, that is a huge problem on that list, you know? And I was very specific. And this isn't for everybody, but I found that as I got older, my menu was just like the takeout menu. I was just like, oh, you're from Saugus? Awesome. You know, like after a while it was just like, oh great, it's on a menu. That's fantastic. So know what you want on the menu. It's very important, but know that your menu, you gotta like know where you live on menus. And like some people, and you can change. Like when I was younger, it was a very high-end fancy restaurant. It was extremely specific and it cost a lot. And now, as long as they'll bring it to the door, I'm totally fine.
I mean, you know, some days I want steak and a very well done cocktail, and
That's
some
right.
days like I'm just trying to eat McDonald's, you know?
Yes,
Like
yes, it's important. It's important to know.
Yeah.
So I love that. Fantastic job. Those were both incredible stories. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been really cool. I hope we do this again.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so I've got two more performers for you. They're both wonderful. Your next performer is one of my favorite comics in town. She's so funny. She has a show right now on the 2MB Twitch channel called The Rehash. It's brand new. I'm very excited for you to see it and for you to see her because she's great. Please welcome Tookie Kavanaugh.
Hi. Oh, God.
Hi.
Oh, my head is so much bigger than I want it to be right now. Don't know how to follow that menu conversation. I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. That was incredible. And makes me think about some of my own choices. So, hi.
Hi.
Good evening. My theme tonight is a time nobody realized they saw the real you, or the real me in this case. So I'll preface everything with this. My mother's side of the family is from the Caribbean, and they're very spiritual. I wouldn't say like super duper religious, but just like very spiritual, very in touch with their spiritual selves. My mom has always been very fascinated, and some of my aunts too, like been very fascinated with otherworldly things, the supernatural, not necessarily dabbling into it themselves, but just like into it, right? Like my mom was very into that show on TLC, Long Island Medium, like at its peak. I don't know if you know, if you know Long Island Medium, it's this little woman with a shell for hair that's just all Aquanet. And she just, and without any sort of warning, will just walk into any place of business and who died? Does somebody here know who died? And just go, oh, I feel spirit. I feel spirit. Is the person who died, does their name start with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J? Like, just complete charlatan ways of trying to prove that they're a medium or anything. Listen, I don't know this lady's life, but I'm pretty sure whatever she's seeing is a byproduct of the CFCs in her hairspray. I'm judging that. But my mom, she had a very good friend who would read tarot cards. So it's like, you touch on it. You don't get into it, but you touch on it. But I'd never really gotten into it myself, but I can say that I've had experience with the other side, if you will. Now, which is in stark contrast to my father's family, because my father's family, part of it is Jewish, and they don't really believe in an afterlife per se. And so I ended up being kind of agnostic, but I had this experience when I was 7 that made me not too skeptical of my mom's beliefs in a way, because when I was 7 years old, my mother's paternal uncle had passed away, and I barely knew the guy. We probably met once when I was an infant. Didn't really know him. But that side of the family lived down in New York. And when he had passed away, we went down for the funeral, like the day right before. And we all drove down. My mom slept on the sofa bed, and I slept in a sleeping bag on the floor next to her. And across the room on the love seat was the deceased granddaughter, our cousin Nancy. And like I slept fine. I wasn't thinking about it, anything. And I think it was pretty much my first funeral because I was 7. And out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, my eyes just pop open. I'm wide awake. I turn and look at the clock on the cable box under the TV, 3 a.m. on the dot. And I'm like, you know. So I slowly sit up thinking, maybe I'll just get a glass of water or something from the kitchen. I turn to my left, and what I see, looking over my cousin Nancy as she's sleeping on the love seat, is this translucent blue and white glowing figure who looked exactly like my mother's uncle who had passed away. Like, and I don't know this guy, but it looked exactly like him. Same clothes he was wearing, same mustache, same hat. And I didn't say a word. I couldn't speak. But I just kind of turned my head back around, lay back down. I was like, bitch, that's a ghost. Like, I know a ghost, right? And I told my family about it. Some didn't believe me, but most were like, oh my God, she's touched. So that was a very interesting 4-hour car ride back home. And I recall maybe hinting at this incident to some kids in school, but of course other kids in school didn't really pay so much attention. But what I didn't realize is that one girl at school did, and tried to utilize my service some years later. So there was this girl in my class. What do we call her? I don't want to use her real name because fuck her. Can I say that? Sorry, F her.
Yeah, you can say that.
Well, I don't want to use her real name. Let's call her Gulia. So Gulia would sometimes be babysat by her grandparents, and she was very, 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 very close with her grandparents. And some girls are daddy's girls, but she was a granddad's girl. She loved her granddad, and which I always was fascinated by because my maternal grandfather had passed away before I was a baby. So I was always fascinated by that, right? Like I'm fascinated by people with siblings because I'm an only child. I'm fascinated by different dynamics in a household. Like, how does that all work? How does that shape you? What does that make you? Why am I not a therapist? How did I become a comic? Anyway, so I didn't have a lot of friends because your girl's kind of weird. And my mom worked a lot of hours. My dad was also a school teacher, but ended up taking a second night job. Just reasons, I don't know. But my parents worked, and so my mom was hoping to find extra childcare, and Gulia's grandmother was very kind in that, like, you know, she said, well, Gulia doesn't have, you know, a playmate after school when her mother comes to pick her up from me, so you two can hang out. And I was like, I guess, fine. So it became sort of a regular thing where, like, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if either of my parents were working late, I would hang out at Gulia's grandmother's house until one of them came to pick me up. And it was fine. And we sort of kind of bonded. But then there was this one year when Gulia's grandfather had passed, and it was very, very tragic for her. it was very like, she just, we're like 32, 33 now, and I still wonder if she's over it, because that was her heart, right? um and so there was this one point in time when she decided she needed to let me know that she knew what I knew in terms of the other side. And so one day we're over her grandmother's house, and she's like, I need you to come with me to the basement. And I'm like, oh, this is how I die. But it turns out we get there and she dusts off a Ouija board. So yeah, an 8 and a 9-year-old just hanging out in a basement with a Ouija board that I guess belonged to her older sister, but she didn't use it anymore because also reasons. So she says, listen, I remember that story you told to people and they didn't believe you about seeing your mom's uncle, but I believe you and I need to contact my grandfather. So let's do this. So like, I was very much being used, not even paid for my services. I'm a little offended still. So we bust out the Ouija board, and we're, we got the little, whatever you call that, the little hand ticker thingy thing. What is that called? Is there a name for that? I'm not sure. So we got it. We're moving around. We're asking yes, no questions. And then she's like, we need to get specific. So she's like, Grandpa, are you here? The meter starts shifting towards yes. And she's like, oh my God, yes, he's here. Grandpa, spell out our names. And it didn't spell out the full names, but it put a T and then a J. And I was like, oh, Gulio, snap. Oh, I think he feels us. And she's, very convinced. But I am at the same time like vulnerable. I can feel everything in me bubbling up. And I'm so full of fear that I don't know how to contain it. And I feel that same sensation of not being able to talk, like when I saw that ghost. And I turned to Gulio, and I'm like, oops. And I'm like, are you sure you want to like keep doing this? And she's like, yes. She goes, Grandpa, show us a sign that you're here. And the next thing we hear is pop, 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 pop. And we both scream and run up the stairs. And to this day, Gulia has no idea that pop, pop, pop sound is the sound of me farting. That is a time when she didn't know that she saw the real me. I hope was appropriately spooky enough for the season. I'm so sorry to desecrate your show like this.
Tookie Kavanaugh couldn't have been any better. Nothing better.
My head on this
I hope every ghost is made of your farts. That was so wonderful. Thank you very, very much. The world that I grew up in is very bland, and most of the horrors were visited upon me by animals and people, so there were no ghosts there. But I hope that everybody gets to have at least ghost stories in their life this Halloween, especially because we're all stuck at home. And may you eat all of the candy that you want until you feel terrible. I've got one final performer for you. She's fantastic. She runs a show on the Comedy Studio channel that you're watching right now called Ferris and Friends. And make sure you tune into it. All of the Comedy Studio's programming throughout the week is really cool. So check it out. And I'm super happy to have her. I've been trying to get her on the show for months, and I'm very glad that I finally accomplished it. So please put your hands together right now for Kathy Ferris.
Thank you, Angela. In fact, you've been wanting me to do this for 6 years, so this is a big thing for all of us. I will say this, I am just so impressed by all the storytellers here tonight. I've never done this, so I just feel like this is like what the Calm app is, right? Like this is just how it is. I really resonated with all of these stories except for the sexualization of dolphins. I feel like this whole thing is like amazing. I love tarot cards. I actually do them myself. I always get like my inner child when really what I want is like, you can go to Marshall's and then have McDonald's for dinner. I'm like, that's exactly the card I was looking for. So my story tonight is about a time that I thought I changed the world. And I really thought hard about this. This was like a stumper for me because there isn't just like a time that I thought I changed the world. There's a thing that I do, like a little thing that I feel like eventually will help change the world. I read an article about 3 years ago from a woman who talked about how she learned from her grandmother that, just doing small acts can change the day. And one of the things that her grandmother taught her to do was to return the shopping cart to the area in the parking lot so it's just not out there. And I don't know why, it just always stayed with me, which is weird because I don't have a good memory. Like if you asked me what my goddaughter's birthday was, couldn't tell you. I mean, I could tell you the BMI of one of the Real Housewives, but I could not tell you that. But this article stuck with me, and I think it was because it was something that was so like small but kind and did something that you may not know has helped other people. And it got me thinking about something that I could do, or wanted to do. I'm not the kind of person who would do like a fun run for dogs with psoriasis, or like spend time with cats or the elderly. But one of the things that I am passionate about is overcooked Doritos. I don't know if you've ever had an overcooked Dorito. And if you have, it's few and far between, and it's because of people like me. There's a lot of experts out there in decorative pillows that say that we should not sweat the small stuff, and I completely disagree. I think there needs to be people in this world who sweat the small stuff, and that's people like me. So when there are times that this happens, and it does happen more often than you can think, I stop and I do something about it. And a lot of people think like, well, okay, great, you call that 1-800 number on the back that guarantees freshness. No. It's so much more than just calling a 1-800 number. Those things don't exist anymore. What you have to do is you have to take a picture and then learn how to upload a picture, and then take the email address and craft a correspondence, and then upload the picture, attach the picture that you learned how to upload to the correspondence, and then make sure on that picture that it has the accurate information, because if you've got the right numbers, you're going to get who did this. All right? It's going to get right down to the factory and the operator who made this thing happen. And so we can make a change. Now you might think, what's a bag of party-sized Doritos? What's a bag of party-sized Doritos here in New England? What that is, that's a staple. That's a staple for the AFC Championship. You invite people over, we're all excited. Pats are gonna do it again this year. You buy one bag of party-sized Doritos because they're probably on sale as well, based on what's happening. And you don't open it right away because you want it to be freshest, right? So it's day of. You've got no time. This is the only bag of Doritos you have. So you have to put it out. And this said bag has a couple of burnt Doritos in it. And then the Pats lose. Do you know what happens in New England when something like that happens? It goes on you. It's on your shoulders. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. And so I do. Every bag that this happens to, I call it in. Now you're like, well, you probably get something for it. Sure, I get reimbursed. I get this beautiful hologrammed, what is it called? The coupon. I don't use it. I frame it. To me, it's like when you go to the doctor's office and they've got those. That's mine. I've got a wall of them. Why? Because that's what I do. Now, people might think, well, that's taking it a little too far. It isn't, because we all have to do something. Like Mother Teresa says, you know, we all can do small things with great love. Or what I like to think about is, I don't know if anybody remembers, but there is this bookmark that my friend Patty Dravinskis shoplifted from the Hallmark store in 1986, and it's called Footprints. Familiar with it? One day a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking up and gently throwing things into the ocean. And as he approached the boy, he said, "What are you doing?" And he said that the boy was just throwing in these starfish. He said, "Well, I'm throwing these in because the tide's going out and they're going to die." And he said, "There's like a mile of them. There's no way you're going to save them all." And the boy just picked up that one fish and said, "Save this one." And that's the same thing with every party-sized bag of Doritos. So I may not be changing the whole world, but I'm changing a little bit of it. That's my story.
Give it up for Kathy Ferris. So great. I believe that there's an entire Dallas, Texas neighborhood populated by people who are unemployed from the Doritos factory because of Kathy Ferris.
Probably.
That was fantastic. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I hope the Hallmark store recovers from that terrible theft.
Love it.
That was so great, guys. That's our show. This has been a great night. Every story was spectacular. Everybody was different. We got to know a whole bunch of people, and they were all themselves. And I feel like I have more friends now, which is, as I said, the entire point of doing the show in the first place. Thank you very much to the Comedy Studio. Like I was saying, they have great shows just about every night of the week, and you can check them out on their website or elsewhere online. Follow the people who are here because they're all really, really talented. And we're going to do this again until I die, probably. Every single Wednesday at 8 o'clock at night from the Boston area. This is Tales from the Inside. Thank you.